Yo, what's up? This is Magic here, and this is new Sony A7RV, the first of its name, meaning the first fifth generation of Sony cameras. Meaning, I think in this camera we're seeing the path that Sony is taking with its next generation cameras. So I've shot with this extensively in the last couple of days. I shot two beautiful sessions, couple of shoots in Portugal, and I've shot them all. Believe me, you name it, I've shot it. A1, A7R4, A7 IV, A9 Mark II, every single Sony camera, I've shot all of them. So I have a pretty good reference to position this camera specifically for my genre, which is wedding photography, couple shoots, or portraits. So let me tell you all about it. So first of all, the body of this camera, it's very similar to what we know from A7 IV. We have maybe slight changes. So first of all, we obviously have three dials. So we have this new top dial on the right corner, which used to be exposure compensation. Now is just lockable custom dial. And then beneath the mode dial, we have this cool photo and video switch. So that is very convenient. The one tiny change that we have here that Sony A7 IV doesn't have, the mode dial is has this button now. So you have to press the button and turn in order to change the mode. So that's kind of different. And then I found one more, a small, tiny design difference. So over the C1 button, like a round kind of piece, and A7 IV doesn't have it. So that's basically it. And other than that, camera feels identical until you look at the screen, because the screen is the whole new screen. It's bigger. It's 3.2 inches versus 2 inches. And now it does everything that all of the previous Sony screens did. So you can do flippy thing that Sony A7S III and A7 IV has. So this, but also you can do whatever all the previous Sony could do. So you can flip it this way. And this is amazing, actually. This is pretty cool change because now we have best of both worlds. I know many photographers saying that they prefer this kind of screen. Then I know many photographers and videographers preferring this type of screen. So now you have both. But also the screen comes with a higher resolution now. So it is finally the experience that I ever wanted from a Sony screen. So it's finally better than the A7 IV screen, A1 screen. You can feel it's just more detailed, image is more sharp and just looks better because of the better screen. Although I have to tell you that looking at the screen, I kind of see this weird grid pattern, tiny grid pattern. Maybe you'll be able to see it here in this little clip. It annoys me a little bit, but yeah, it is what it is, I guess. But just so you know. All the ports on the left side are nearly identical with the ones that you know from A7 IV. So we have full HDMI. You also have a flash sync. That's not on A7 IV. Mic input, mic output, and the USB-C power delivery port and a multi-port, or USB micro multi-port. So those are the ports on the side of this camera. On the other side of the camera, we have two card slots, both taking either SD cards or CF Type A cards. So this is the dual slot known from A1 and A7S III. And then one more huge change is going to be the viewfinder. The viewfinder is that beautiful, gorgeous viewfinder known from Sony A1 camera. So it has 9.44 million dots. It does refresh with a refresh rate 120 frames per second, and A1 does 240, so that's the difference. But other than that, it's beautiful. Looking through it, it's amazing. Also in the menu, you can change display quality to high. So then looking through the viewfinder is going to be this beautiful crisp image. Although whenever you half press the shutter and start tracking and you see the autofocus point, it kind of degrades in quality. You can clearly see that in these recordings from the screen from the actual shoot, that the image is crystal clear whenever you're looking at it, and whenever I start tracking, it degrades. I did send this feedback to Sony. I hope they will change that, because this is also slightly less ideal experience that I would wish to have. Now, talking about the specs, we have 61 megapixels, so the same amount of megapixels that the previous A7R4 had. We have new processors. The processors known from A1 camera, two Bion Z XR processors, but then there's something new. There's another processor in this camera, which is the AI unit, artificial intelligence unit, that is actually supporting the AF system, the autofocus and auto exposure calculations, and the white balance, auto white balance. So this is the first big new step for Sony cameras, introducing artificial intelligence unit in the camera. Like, what does it mean? So according to Sony graph, Sony showed this graph on the brief, the processing power of the previous camera is like this big, and then the processing power with the AI unit with the new camera is like this. So this is the first measurement we were given during the brief. But then in real life, what does it mean? It actually introduces the new way of tracking not only people, but subjects. So now we have improved human, animal, and bird autofocus, and then we have introduced new types of autofocus. We can now track insects, car, trains, and planes. And with trains, capabilities of the Sony A7RV, the Portuguese straps, it's working! It is working! It is working! Oh my God, it's beautiful. I'd say it works pretty well. But of course, what is most interesting to me is that human autofocus. How will this affect me shooting couples, me shooting portraits? So what is new here is that we not only have eye autofocus that we used to have and then face autofocus, we have this new way, like new rectangle box that is like not square box, it's like rectangle. And it does recognize like a body structure, basing on recognizing nose, eyes, ears, what was there, like neck, shoulders, elbows, wrists, hips, knees, and ankles. So all of these elements will give you a better recognition of the subject as a human. And it does mean that if person is like quite far away in the frame, the camera will still recognize it as a person, even though like it could be turned back to you. You will still see that new kind of box saying like, oh, I'm recognizing this as a person. So then when you start tracking on that subject, camera knows it's a person. So when it turns front to us, it will just move the autofocus box to the face and the eyes if it can recognize the face or eyes. But if it does not, it will still recognize the body structure. And this is next level. But also on top of that, you have whole new menu for the settings of the subject recognition. It is called subject recognition. And now what you can do is allowing you to tailor the system to your needs. So you can now individually go to each type of the object you want to focus on and change a tracking shift range, which determines how big or small the subject in the frame is going to be picked up by the autofocus system. So it goes from the narrow to wide, and then there's like 5 levels of that. And then you also have even more options for other AF objects like tracking persistence level. This determines how sticky the autofocus is, and then sensitivity, which determines how much object stands out from the background to be picked up by the autofocus system. So you actually have tons of options here to play with. I feel that this needs like a separate dedicated video for the new autofocus system. So make sure to subscribe to watch all the content about the new Sony A7RV. For the couple shoots, I kept my settings at standard settings, which is mid-level of human recognition from the far away, and I have to tell you, it works flawlessly. So it actually, no matter what I threw at this camera on a couple shoot, like it did focus. It did recognize the face, eyes, and full body. Indeed, it did recognize full body in certain situations. So like when person was farther away and it, like other camera wouldn't recognize the subject as a person, this camera did. And on top of that, you can now have like also new option. If you shoot wide focus area, you can actually switch from the face to face that you want to track on. So now the wide focus area that I previously found useless because you don't have any control over what face or what person you want to focus at. So personally, I would always shoot spot tracking, but now wide gives you the options to change the faces in the frame. So there's multiple faces. You can just switch from face to face with your joystick and then click focus, and then you'll be focusing and tracking that subject. And then going through the images, I don't think there was a single image that I actually missed during the shoot. So all the photos were in focus, and you wonder, how does that compare to previous cameras? Because in previous cameras, the system was already quite high-end. And to be honest, it does feel superior to A7 IV. It does seem faster, and then the body recognition system like gives you even more ways of focusing. So like if the subject is farther away, it will be picked up quicker. So that is a big change. Like shooting really close and the way I shoot, so using the spot, like I would say like the difference is just like, you know, maybe a couple % more photos in focus. I probably, you know, with A7 IV, I still have 95% photos in focus. So let's say with this camera, I have 100%. So, you know, the differences now with such an advanced autofocus systems are, you know, not that significant as they were before, but also like with introduction of the new systems, new ways of tracking, like this camera becomes the camera that can focus on anything. Does it feel superior to Sony A1 though? Like in a ways it does, because it does have like different ways of focusing that Sony A1 does not have. It does have AI unit that Sony A1 does not have. So it's kind of an A1 killer, like you could say. But also with A1, there's this number that he said in the specs that like A1 can have 240 autofocus and auto exposure calculations per second, and that is something that you definitely feel shooting A1, that A1 is just so quick with like changing from eye to face to a subject that like there is so much power in A1. Like most likely because it needs to focus on a subject when you shoot 30 frames per second, which A1 does, and A7R5 does not. And actually I have to say they're pretty close, so A7R5 is like it does feel almost as fast as A1. And looking at the photos, they're gorgeous, like 61 megapixels, tons of details. You can just, you know, look how easily you can crop in. I did like from, let's say, from horizontal to vertical. So you can see all the details, and I love both shoots I've done with this camera. I couldn't be happy with the results. I processed all of my photos with Magic Cadabra presets. You can check them out in the description. This is the main preset that I like use for all of my work. So everything you see on my Instagram, everything you see here is just edited with my Magic Cadabra preset. And speaking of the quality of the image, it's actually interesting because the ISO performance of this camera is also said to be superior. There's like because of the new processors and so on. And I've checked it against the A7 IV. And my mind is blown actually, because it performs amazing. You can shoot, I'd say you can shoot 12,800 ISO with no problem. You can go even higher, 25,600. I will include those in the description if you want to download the ISO test files. The RAWs from A7R5 are actually, I had to process them with EXIF tool, so I can open them in Lightroom. So like I include those files, and I will include original files that you can just go and check yourself. But I have to say I'm impressed with the ISO performance of this camera. And one more thing regarding the performance of this camera and the memory cards, because now we're throwing the big chunky files on the SD card. So how does the SD card performance works and the buffer? So buffer is said to be way bigger, and in my experience I could shoot 100 raw files, compressed raw files in a one take at 10 frames per second. So that is limit that I probably on my shoot would like never get close to. When I was shooting my first shoot, I was shooting RAWs plus Hive files because I didn't know if I will be able to edit the raw files, so I included the Hive files, and that was slowing me down. I could get like 50-ish files in the buffer, and then they were slowly being copied to my Sony TAF M cards, so also not the fastest cards. With the fastest cards you get slightly more speed. You can see here, so here you can see the speeds of clearing the buffer on a 150 meg write speed and on a 300 meg speed. And then obviously you get even more speed if you're gonna use the CF Type A cards, but these are very expensive. Personally, I don't use them. And last but not least, video capabilities of this camera. This camera is not crippled at all in terms of video. It does shoot 8K 24 frames per second, does shoot 4K 60 frames per second with a small crop, and then you have Cinetone, you have S-Log, you have 10-bit 422, so everything you kind of need from the current generation of like the flagship camera, you would say. And then something very new, 8-stop optical image stabilization. Like personally, because I'm not like video shooter, I don't have much experience of shooting different cameras in video mode. I can't tell you how good is the stabilization. Go check other videographers' reviews. Like this is photographer's review. So from photographer's perspective, what's my take? The R5 is actually definitely a huge step forward. It does give us the light on this is what Sony is going into. The AI chips and like even better recognition of the subjects, different subjects, the way the camera will handle the focusing, the white balance stuff and all that stuff. So this camera seems to have everything that actually you would need from the camera. I would say it's almost A1 killer. There's only one thing keeping A1 on a pedestal, and this is a stacked sensor, 30 frames per second and no bonding in the silent mode. Obviously with this camera, this is 61 megapixels, this is not a stacked sensor, so you will get banding, you will get a rolling shutter when taking photos in a silent mode. So this is not all-in-one camera. This is all-in-one minus silent shutter camera. And then versus Sony A7 IV, it's definitely superior. It has twice as many pixels. So if you need pixels, like before that, like if you would be choosing R4 and 7 IV, there were so many things that A7 IV was superior to A7R4 that like the choice was much harder. Now, if you need pixels, A7R5 is much superior to A7 IV in any way. It does have everything that A7 IV has, and then it has twice as many pixels. It comes with a price, like in Europe, it does cost 4,500 euros, so it's almost double the price of A7 IV, but then like you get twice as many pixels. I guess the price is calculated based on pixels. But then not everyone needs 61 megapixels. It's a lot of megapixels. It means bigger cards, it means bigger hard drives, it means like a different workflow using the twice as big files. So like the choice is yours. I hope you enjoyed this video. There's more videos coming on this camera. Even this week, there's like a full shoot behind the scenes from this camera. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe, and I see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.